My name is DeeDee Baldwin. I'm the history librarian at Mississippi State, and I'm going to be talking today about genealogy resources for librarians. Usually when I teach genealogy workshops, I'm teaching genealogists how to do their own genealogy, but here this is intended to help librarians who may not do genealogy, may not be interested in it, or have much experience doing it. And so when they have a patron who comes in to ask for help, this is intended to give you sort of an idea of where to start. So there are three sort of big groups of genealogists that you'll be running into in Mississippi. So the first group are the people who just want to get started. They have no idea how to start a family tree, where to even begin. Another really common group is you'll have someone who's done a lot of work on their family tree, but they're stuck on one particular person. So I'll show you some sources to recommend to them that they might not know about already to maybe be able to track that person down. And the third big group we get is African American genealogists. So I'm going to show you some sources that are specifically designed to help Black people find their ancestors. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. So right now we're looking at Heritage Quest. This is available to Mississippi libraries generally. It is run by Ancestry.com, so a lot of the screens look like what you'll see on Ancestry, especially the search screens. So to start off with, let's say you're going to have somebody from this first group. They just want to learn how to start a family tree. So I'm going to show you two ways that they can start a tree online, and both are free. So first of all, and I'm going to switch tabs here, they can start a tree on Ancestry.com, and this is free. They won't have access to all of the records that they want to search, but actually creating the tree is free. And so if they just go up to this upper corner here and do the free trial, this asks for credit card information, and a lot of patrons might not want to do that. So I'm going to show you kind of a backdoor way to create an account without having to do the credit card. So if you're on Ancestry.com, you scroll all the way to the bottom, and there's this link here at the bottom that says Support Center. We're going to click on that. And then in the search box that comes up, you'll just do a search for free account. And the very first link here, creating a free Ancestry account, we're going to click on that. And then you can click this button, create a free account. It's several steps, and it's kind of a, a roundabout method, but this is where they can go to create that free account and start working on their tree. So let me log into my Ancestry test account to show you how to get them started on a tree if they need that help. So when you first create your account, it's going to take you to this screen. I'm just going to go back to Ancestry. Oh, sorry about that. So it's going to take you to this screen. And then you can come up to the top and click on Trees and click Start a New Tree. And then the person can just click on the button to add themselves. And you can see it's going to ask you for all this basic information. And once they've entered themselves and at least one parent, they will have a tree started. So that's one way to create a free family tree online. The second place they can go to create a free tree is FamilySearch. So I'm going to click over to another tab here, and the URL is FamilySearch.org. You can create a free account, and we're also going to talk about this later because there's some records they can search here from Mississippi that Ancestry and Heritage Quest do not have. So once you're logged in, you can click on Family Tree, and I'm going to click on Tree. And you can see it's kind of a similar setup to Ancestry. You can start, you can do it landscape view or portrait. Right now, this is portrait view. If you put it to landscape, this is kind of maybe what they're more used to seeing on Ancestry.com. And the difference between Ancestry trees and FamilySearch trees is that Ancestry, everybody makes their own tree. So if you have a person, an ancestor who was born maybe in the early 1800s, and they have a ton of descendants, they might appear on hundreds of people's family trees. FamilySearch does theirs a little bit differently. Their intention is to have one family tree that everybody connects into. So once you get back a certain way, usually maybe to your grandparents or your great-grandparents, you're going to find that somebody else has probably already entered them into the tree. And so all you're doing is connecting yourself and maybe your parents, some more recent people. You're just connecting them into a tree that already exists. It's kind of like a wiki tree, like on Wikipedia, where anybody can edit it. That's sort of how FamilySearch's tree works. And if you have people that are, if you have patrons that are worried about people changing their information, you can assure them that that's extremely rare. I've been using FamilySearch's tree for many, many, many years, and that has never happened to me. And if you click on a page, if you click on a person, I'm going to show my dad for an example. There's a button over here where you can click follow. Mine says following because I'm already following my dad's page. But if it's someone you're not following yet, you can click this follow button, and FamilySearch will send you an email if anybody makes changes to this page. So if you are worried about people going in there and changing stuff, you can choose to be notified if anybody does that. But again, I've never had a problem with that happening. So that's how you start people off on their, just the very basic step of creating a tree. So once they have a tree, they're going to want to search records and start finding people. So I'm going to go over to my Heritage Quest tab here, and let's look at Heritage Quest. So this is their home page. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to come to the top left corner and click the search button. And here's the basic layout of that. So one of the first record sets that your patrons will be using is the Social Security Death Index. This is going to be for the most recent people in their tree. Depending on their age, it might be where they find their parents, their grandparents, sometimes their great-grandparents if they're really young. So if you scroll down, this is the Social Security Death Index. And this covers people who died roughly between the 1960s to 2014. I say the 1960s because that's where the bulk of them really start. You will get some outliers that are in earlier years. Like you can see it officially starts in 1935, but you're very, very rarely going to find people that go back that far. Most people, you're going to find people that died after 1960. That's where most of them will be. So with the Social Security Death Index, your patrons will be able to find birth and death dates, again, for people who died recently. This is one of the most basic record sets that you use in genealogy. It's right up there with the census. And it's helpful for people who might not know exact dates for recent people. So again, this is where they're going to want to go to do that. And just to show you, let me go to Ancestry's search page. So I want to show you that these are almost exactly alike. If I go to Ancestry and choose to search the Social Security Death Index, you can see that I'm switching back and forth between the tabs. You can see that they're pretty much exactly alike. Because again, Heritage Quest, excuse me, Heritage Quest is based on Ancestry.com, and it uses their databases. You can see down here where it says source information that it's Ancestry's database. So anytime you have a search form on any genealogy website, make sure they know that they don't have to enter all this information. In fact, the more they enter, the less likely they are to get results. So just enter the name of the person and enter what you know. If they don't know the person's birthday, because a lot of times they're using the Social Security Death Index to find these dates, so they might not know. You can set a range of years to search. And what I'm going to show you here applies to all search forms on both Ancestry.com and Heritage Quest. When you enter a year, you get this little pop-up here, And if you click on it, it allows you to set a date range. So let's just say you think your grandfather, John Smith, was born in the 30s. You could set a date range of plus or minus 5 years. And that way it'll search for all John Smiths who were born between 1930 and 1940. Obviously, if you're using a common name like John Smith, you're going to have to narrow it down more than that because there's going to be tons of results. Let me just show you what this gives us if we do this search. Yeah, so we're getting over 13,000 results, which is unmanageable because it's such a common name. But most people are not going to have ancestors with super common names like that. And you can also set, more than the birth year, obviously. If you have sort of an idea of when they died, like, oh, I think he died in 1990, you can put that. And if you're not sure, again, you can set a date range. You can put, if they know where he lived and where he might have died, you can come to this any event search box and maybe type a city. So if they think he died in Mississippi, if you start typing that, it'll give you Mississippi, USA. You select that, and we're going to click search. And this is going to narrow it down a good bit. It's still over 200 results just because the name is John Smith. And you can see there's some random results thrown in here as well. Like here's an Anna. It'll do sort of what it considers to be close matches. I'm not sure why it thinks Anna is a close match there, but yeah, it'll give you sort of results that they think are close. So that's how you do the Social Security Death Index. And they can view the record. It doesn't show much more than what's on that search results screen. But with the SSDI, you get their birth date, you get a death date, and you get a last residence. A lot of people think that the last residence means where the person died, and that is not correct because, as we know, a lot of people don't die at home. They might die in a hospital in another city. They might be traveling. So this just means that it's the last place where their Social Security check was sent. So just make sure people know that that's not where the person died. So that's the Social Security Death Index. The other common thing that you're going to be using to search, probably more than anything else, is the census. So again, I clicked on search at the top, and it lets you pick what census year you want to search. There is an option where you can search every US census that's been released so far from 1790 to 1940, and it'll include 1950 when that has been fully transcribed. You can search the 1950 census already at the National Archives site, but it hasn't been fully transcribed yet by humans, and so it's not considered really searchable yet. But when that one goes up, you'll be able to search every census from 1790 to 1950. I don't recommend doing that because you get way too many results and it's really, really messy. You always want to encourage people to really target their census search. So I recommend starting with the first census that person would appear on. So for example, if you have someone who was born in 1875, the first census they're going to appear on would be 1880. So I would try to find them with their parents and their family on the 1880 census, and then I would work forward as far forward as I could go. Some people prefer to start with the most recent and work backwards. Some people like me prefer to start with the first one they appear on and go forwards. That's totally a matter of preference. So when you're searching the census, and for now I'm just going to click on 1880 and use that as an example. Just like with the other form, you don't need to fill all this out. In fact, do not fill all this out. Really, mostly what you're going to need on the census is a name, and an estimated birth year really helps. And once again, if you type a year here, you're going to get that little box that lets you set a date range. And you do especially want to use a date range when you're searching the census because birth years are often off a lot. Sometimes they're only off a year or two. Because they didn't go to the door and ask the person, what's your birthday? They said, how old are you? And depending on what month the census was taken in, the person's birthday for that year might not have happened yet. And so it's very common for people who were born later in the year. It's very common for their birth year to be a year off on the census. But then you also have people, especially in rural areas like Mississippi, that didn't know their birthday, especially African Americans in those rural areas who had been enslaved. They didn't know when they were born. It had never been recorded, so they would just kind of estimate. You also had cases where people straight up lied. It's kind of a stereotype, but you will especially see this in women. I do have an ancestor on my tree who stayed the same age on like 3 censuses. So that will happen. So just be aware to always take the birth year on the census with a grain of salt. And that's why it's always smart to use a date range there. So again, when you're searching the census, you're going to want to have their name. You're going to want to have an estimated birth year if you know or have some idea. If you really have no idea, you can put plus or minus 10 years, and this will search 1865 to 1880. It won't go to 1885 because obviously this is the 1880 census and 1885 hadn't happened yet. But yeah, you can set that big range, and you might want to have some idea of where they lived. If you don't know, that's okay. Sometimes, you know, a lot of times you don't know, but if you do, you can click lived in, and I'm going to put, let's just say they lived in Hinds County, Mississippi. If you start typing that, Ancestry will give you the location and you can just click on it. And just like with the date, they're going to let you set a range on the location. So if you enter a county, it's going to let you make it exact to this county, so you're certain that they lived in Hinds County. If you're not quite sure, you can say to search the county and any adjacent counties. If you think they lived in Mississippi, but you're not sure, you can say state, or you can even go state and adjacent states. And if you just have absolutely no clue, you can tell it to search the entire United States. If you do search the entire US, just be aware you're going to have a hard time if it's a common name. If it's a less common name, you might not get too many results to go through for the whole country. But yeah, if it's a common name, you're going to want to narrow this down as much as you possibly can. So let's say we're looking for a Jane Smith who was born around 1875. I'm going to give that a plus or minus 5 years. And she lived in Hinds County, and I'm going to tell it to search county and adjacent counties. And let's see what we get for this. It's a common name, yeah, so we should get, oh, we got a good number. So once again, you're going to get some random results thrown in, like they're throwing in a John Smith, they're throwing in some Annas. So, you know, if it doesn't fit your search, you can just ignore those. But we did get 2 Jane Smith that lived in Hinds County that are sort of within our date range. And the person can click on view record. And the best way to make sure you're looking at the right person is if they know other family members, if they recognize these other names. That's kind of how you can help verify it. And I was hoping they would give us a suggested records on the right. We did not get that with this one. Let's try another one. Let's see if this one has it. Getting this with her either. Just like with Ancestry, Heritage Quest, if they have some matches, I'm not getting any, and I'm not going to keep trying to get them. But on the right side under here, it'll say other suggested records that might match this person. If we're not getting any, that just means that their machine isn't finding any close matches with this person. It doesn't mean those records don't exist. It just means the machines can't narrow them down enough to say, yes, these are possible records. So that's really handy on both Ancestry and Heritage Quest to get those other suggested records. Those can save you a lot of time. Just make sure you always verify that it is the same person, because it isn't always. So that is searching the census. One other thing you really want to make sure patrons understand is that they're going to find some very interesting spellings on the census. Some census takers only put people's initials instead of their full name. Some of them used abbreviations and nicknames. Like in this case, they put JNO, which was the common abbreviation for John. A lot of times you'll see Sally instead of Sarah. You'll see Molly instead of Mary. Molly was a common nickname for Mary. So just be aware, you're going to find nicknames, you're going to find very interesting spellings, and you're going to find estimated birth dates that are way off. A lot of times the birthplaces aren't correct, especially again with African Americans who had been enslaved. Some of them weren't sure where they were born. So again, that might not always be correct. Just make sure that you verify stuff like this on other records. So one last thing to say about the census, I'm going to click the search form in the top left here to go back to the main search page. Some important census years to be aware of. The 1850 census is a key year because that was the first census that listed everybody in the household together. Before 1850, all that was recorded was the head of the household, who was usually the father, the man, and then everybody else in the house was just a tick mark. So they would have females age 5 to 10, males age 15 to 20, something like that, and they would just have tick marks. So if you're looking for someone on the census who was married before 1850 and you're trying to find them with their parents, that's not going to happen. So 1850, again, is the first census year where everybody in the household was listed by name. Another important census year is 1870. This is going to be the first census where you're going to be able to find most Black Americans. If they had been free people of color before the Civil War, they will be listed on earlier censuses. But if they were enslaved, they are not going to be found until 1870. It's just one of those really frustrating sort of brick wall creators that you can't go past 1870 unless they were free people of color and were listed by name. Another big census year is 1890, and that is because it pretty much doesn't really exist. Almost all of the 1890 census was burned, and so hardly any of it's left. I have never found any of my ancestors on the 1890 census. So if you ever find somebody on that one, it's just extremely lucky. So for all intents and purposes, the 1890 census doesn't really exist. So we do have this big 20-year gap between 1880 and 1900. It's very frustrating because a lot of people get lost in there, but it's just a fact we have to deal with. So that's the census. Another thing you can look under the census, I'm going to click search now to show the full list here. If you scroll down, it's going to list them all. And there's other types of censuses you can search besides the main year. You're going to have these 1850 and 1860 slave schedules. Those can be somewhat helpful, but just be aware that people are not listed on there by name. Not the enslaved people, they're just tick marks. The slave schedules only list the person who, quote, quote, owned them. And then the people that they enslaved are listed by gender and age and just tick marks. There are no names. But it can be helpful if they have an idea of how old their ancestor was roughly, and maybe they know the plantation they worked on. They might be able to find someone on the slave schedule who matches their ancestor, but they will not find names on here, unfortunately. And you can see there's other types as well. But be aware the slave schedules can be useful sometimes if you're trying to do African American genealogy. All right, another big common record type that people will be using and will have a lot of luck with are the World War I draft cards. So that's going to be under military records. And if I click search military records, this is organized a little bit differently than Ancestry's military records page. Let's see. Kayla, there's probably going to be a couple minutes time here that I'm going to ask you to skip for me.
That's fine, we can do that.
Yeah. I thought I knew where the World War I draft cards are on here, but I am not seeing them. I actually don't like Heritage Quest's setup, but we won't say that on the recording.
No, I'm the same way.
Where is the thing to just choose what record set you want to search? What am I missing here? Yeah, there's going to be a lot to cut out here.
That's totally fine. I
Ah,
figured, because especially when you're so used to Ancestry and then you go to Heritage Quest, which isn't that different, but just different enough to like make problems like this. Yeah.
like I'm seriously not seeing it on here. Where are the World War I draft cards? Because like if you go to Ancestry and click on military, it's like the top record set.
Yeah.
It's like the #1 featured data collection. So I'm not sure. You know what? Just skip this military records part entirely
Okay.
because I don't know how to find it here. And I'm going to show where I'll just show them how to find it on FamilySearch.
Okay.
All right, skipping. So those are the basic records that you'll be using on Heritage Quest. You can scroll down and obviously you can see there's a lot more here that they can explore. And if they do have that free Ancestry account, I'm going to switch back over to Ancestry here. If they double click the search button at the top of that Ancestry page, it takes them to this really nice search page. And they won't be able to use all these records without a subscription, but some of the record sets are free. For example, if you click on the census, they are able to search the 1880 census, the 1900 census, and the 1940 census for free. And what there is of the 1950 census, it's not really done yet, but they will be able to search that for free as well. So just encourage them, if they do create that free account on Ancestry, to use as much of it as they can. And if they find something on here that they can't access without a subscription, sometimes those records can be found on FamilySearch for free. And a lot of those records are also available on Heritage Quest. They just have to hunt down sort of where to find them on here. So let's switch over to FamilySearch, because FamilySearch does have some records that Ancestry and Heritage Quest do not have for Mississippi. All right, so on FamilySearch, we're going to click search at the top and we're going to choose search records. All right, so FamilySearch has every US census you can search for free. They have the Social Security Death Index, just like Ancestry does. They have World War I draft cards, which are really cool. And pretty much any ancestor, any male ancestor who was born around the 1880s and 1890s, they're pretty much all going to have a World War I draft card. And it's a good way to find out men's middle names, because most of them do have the guy's middle name, and a lot of them do have the exact birth date. They're also cool because they tell you what the man's occupation was and where he worked. And a lot of them, you're able to see the ancestor's actual signature. So those are a cool record set to search. But let's talk about the Mississippi records they have. So when you're on FamilySearch's search records page, if you scroll down a little bit, you can search by collection title. And if you just type Mississippi, it'll show you what records they have here. So the Mississippi Enumeration of Educable Children, that's a mouthful. That is a record set that Ancestry might have added recently. I'm not sure about that, but last time I checked, Ancestry did not have this one. This collection, it doesn't give you a ton of information. It tells you where the child lived. It gives you the name of a parent, and it tells you an estimated age, but those ages are, they can be off a lot because they based the age on what grade the child was in. And a lot of children, what grade they were in didn't match their age, especially in a place like Mississippi, very agricultural. Kids often missed a lot of school to help on farms and things like that. So their ages can be pretty off depending on what grade they were in. But the enumeration of educable children can be useful if you didn't really know where the family was living at any given time. It can be a useful way to kind of track what county, at least, they were living in. So that can be useful. And it can help you find maybe the names of their other siblings that you might not have known about. So it can be pretty helpful. But the big record set that FamilySearch has that Ancestry doesn't is if you scroll down to, it's going to be Mississippi State Archives, various records. This is a really cool set that FamilySearch went to the Department of Archives and History and scanned. And it's organized by county. So you can search by name, but you can also click here where it says browse, and you can choose what county your ancestors lived in. So let's say you're looking at Lowndes. And the types of records sort of depend by county, because some counties had record sets that others didn't. So we're looking at Lowndes here, and you can see they have county tax rolls. They have some Civil War records. It looks like they have some ex-slave narratives, military grave registrations. So it's kind of just a cool hodgepodge of different types of records that were at the Department of Archives and History. And sometimes you can find some cool things in here that you can't find on Ancestry. So just make sure that patrons know about FamilySearch. Again, it's totally free. All of the records are free. They have a whole bunch of the main records that they're going to be searching that you would have to pay for on Ancestry. So it's just a really good site to know about, especially if you're searching in Mississippi records, because as any Mississippi genealogist can tell you, Mississippi's online record collections are really, really bad. Other states, you know, you have tons of stuff. Like Texas, for instance, you can find birth certificates, death certificates. They list the parents' names. They listed what cemetery they were buried in. They have marriage records, divorce records. They just have a treasure trove of documents you can find from other states. But Mississippi, it's like, no. There's some marriage records, and there's these records from the state archives on FamilySearch, but there's really not a lot. So you kind of have to take things where you can find them. All right, so another site that you're going to want to recommend to people if they haven't looked at already, especially if they're stuck on a certain ancestor, is you're going to want to send them to findagrave.com. Your more experienced genealogists are already going to know about this site. You might know about it as well. People use it a lot, even if they're not genealogists. So Find a Grave is a free site, and it lets you create memorial pages based on where people are buried. So it's really useful to search by a specific name. Find a Grave also comes up in record hints on both Ancestry.com and FamilySearch. So you're going to get suggestions for any records that they find here for you, but it's also just a good site to visit on its own. So for example, you can do a search for your family's last name. We can do, let's just try Jones, and let's say they lived in Bolivar County. Again, if you start typing it, they're going to give you the location, and you just click on it. So we're going to look for all Joneses in Bolivar County, Mississippi. If there's people in your family that you don't know about, this can be a really handy way to try to find them. And not a lot of people search FamilySearch, or sorry, not a lot of people search Find a Grave in this way. So this is a very common last name. So we're getting 232 results. And let's say that you are related to this Alice Claudia Sims Jones. If you click on someone's name and Find a Grave, they have these really useful family connection things. Not all of the memorials have these because they have to be added by people who know. So not all of them have these, but this is a really good example. Good grief, a lot of Sims. Not all of them have these, but the ones that do, they can be really, really helpful to connect other family members. Another thing that's really useful is, since a lot of families, especially in rural areas, were all buried in the same cemetery, you could click on Jones, which is her married name, or Sims, which is her maiden name, and you can search for everyone with that last name just in this cemetery. So if we wanted to see other Simses that are in New Cleveland Cemetery, most, if not all, of these people are most likely related to her in some way. So that can be really useful. You can also search by the town, the county, and then it goes all the way up to the state and national level, which is less useful, obviously. But especially looking in the same cemetery is a really, really handy way to find relatives you might not have known about. It's especially useful to find people who died in infancy or in young childhood, especially, you know, between census years. If you didn't find them on Find a Grave, you might never even know they existed unless you found some kind of death record for them, or the death was recorded in a family Bible that you happen to have. Except for Find a Grave, you might not even know they existed. So this is really helpful to do a surname search by county in Find a Grave, and that's a really easy way for patrons to try to find family members from the counties where they came from. There's also billiongraves.com. So this site works essentially the same way. It's not necessarily about making memorial pages, but it is about documenting entire cemeteries. So you can go to research and you can do a person search or a cemetery search. And just like with Find a Grave, you can search for a last name and you can pick the state and county where you want to look. So those are the cemetery sites where it can be really handy to do last name searches and find relatives, connect with relatives they might not have known about. Another really helpful source, if they had ancestors who served in the military, especially if they're looking for people who served in the Civil War, fold3.com. This site has other types of records, but it is primarily focused on military records. It is a subscription site, but they have a free trial for 7 days. So you can suggest to patrons that they might want to, start that free trial and get as much as they can and then cancel it. I'm a big proponent of doing that. And like I said, especially for Civil War records, if you've been working in a library long enough, you probably know all the rigmarole we have to go through to look up Civil War service records. At the library where I work, there's this like huge binder. So first of all, you have to look in a book and find what regiment the person served in. Then we would have to go to this binder and look up what microfilm reel that regiment is on. And then they would have to, scroll through that microfilm reel to try to find these service records. On Fold 3, you can just do a search for the person's name. And even without a subscription, you can still do a search. So let's try a less common name. I'm just going to make up a name here. Let's just try Calvin Roberts. And they won't let you see the record without a subscription, but it will let you see this little preview page. So even without a subscription, you can still get an idea if they have something on your ancestor, and maybe that would give you an idea of whether or not you want to do that free trial, save the records, and then cancel the trial. So it does let you look through it and see what they have. And like I said, Fold 3, they have a variety of other records, but to me, the big starring attraction of this site is being able to just easily search and save these Civil War records. And Civil War records are especially popular to be looking for people in Mississippi. All right, so another site that you can really get a lot out of, believe it or not, is Google Books. A lot of family historians might not realize this, but Google Books has a lot of free books, and you can view the entire book, and you can even search inside them as long as they were written before copyright kicks in, which is around, I think now it's like 1924, 25. And a lot of family history books and county history books were written in the early 1900s before that copyright cutoff point. And so you can find some cool stuff in here. So let's just try Mississippi County History. So when you get to this search result page, if you click on Tools, if it's not already showing this thing here, you can toggle this Tools button. And you're going to want to go to where it says Any View and click Full View. And this way, it's only going to show you books that you can actually read the whole thing. So that'll save you some time. And here is a great example, A History of Newton County, Mississippi from 1834 to 1894. You can scroll through this entire book. You can also search inside it. So if your family lived here, you could maybe search for that last name and see if it comes up in here. And these old county history books are fantastic because they all have like biographies of prominent citizens. A lot of them have, let me scroll down a little bit to the biography section if we can find it. A lot of them have illustrations of what the people looked like. So let's just say you're related to this Gillespie guy, this C.F. Gillespie. I'm going to see where else he's mentioned, or if any other Gillespies are mentioned. Okay, it's just this one page. But let's say you were looking for this last name in Newton County, and you can find this information about a C.F. Gillespie. Maybe you're related to him. So just encourage patrons, especially ones who are dealing with brick walls, to look at Google Books. Here's another full text thing, Pike County, Pioneer Families. This is going to have a ton of family history information in it. Scrolling down some more. A soil survey, not so much. You're going to get a lot of junk in here too to scroll through, but these county and family histories are fantastic to find information from. And they usually contain biographical information that you don't get from the census, which is just sort of like names and dates. A lot of them tell you more about the family, what the person did, why they were important, things like that. So you can usually find some great information in Google Books. Another great source of information is the various newspaper sites. The biggest one is newspapers.com, and Ancestry does connect to this database. I'm not sure if Heritage Quest does, but Ancestry does. And they give you the information from the obituary, but to view the actual article, you do have to be a subscriber. This is another subscription site. Again, there's a free trial, so they could get on here and find as much as they can and then cancel it. Unfortunately, library institution subscriptions are kind of pricey, but I use this site constantly at my job, so I subscribe to it myself. It's worth subscribing to for most genealogists, unless they just lived in an area where for whatever reason, it doesn't have a lot of subscriptions to that local paper. But Mississippi, for instance, newspapers.com has tons and tons of years of the Clarion Ledger, and it has other newspapers as well. Now, there's also a free newspaper site, and that's Chronicling America. And you can remember this URL, chroniclingamerica.loc. That's for Library of Congress.gov. Or if you just Google it, it's the first result. Chronicling America is a free newspaper site, and they do have a lot of Mississippi newspapers. So this can be a useful site to search for the person's name. Newspapers are a great way to find not just obituaries, which is probably sort of their most common use for genealogists, but you're also going to find other types of articles. You might find wedding announcements, but you also might find kind of fun stuff. I found an article about my great-great-great-grandmother, and she lived in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and there's a newspaper article about her accidentally shooting her husband. And I found another one about my great-great-grandfather who lived in Louisiana, about him stealing a horse and having to go to the state penitentiary for a year. So you can find really colorful family stories like that as well, not just obituaries. Other newspaper sites that you might want to look at just to see if they have stuff you can use. There's genealogybank.com. Again, a subscription site, but they have a free trial, so you could see what they have. You can also browse their collections, so we can go to newspaper by state. So if you wanted to see just what they have from Mississippi, you could go here, and if you know what city or town your ancestor lived in or lived closest to, you could see what newspapers they have from that city and what years it covers. And if it covers, you know, years that your ancestor was living or their family was living, you might be able to find stuff here. Just like with the other sites, you can do a search on newspapers.com and Genealogy Bank. You can do searches on these sites and see what results you get. You just can't view the actual paper unless you have a subscription. So you can try searches and see if they have stuff you can use, and then use that to decide whether or not you want to bother doing the free trial. But I have found that almost always it's worth doing a free trial because there's always something on here that you can use. There's also newspaperarchive.com. I have had less luck on this one, but depending, you know, what coverage area you're looking for, they might have some stuff that you can't find anywhere else. So those are your big sites that you're going to want to be looking at. One other thing is the Bureau of Land Management, and I'm just copying my link here. You can also Google this, but here's the link. It's glorecords.blm.gov. So if your ancestor owned land, you can look them up here, and it's really cool because you can view the original documents. If you're unsure, you can come here and search and see. So let's change this to Mississippi, and let's say your ancestors lived in Choctaw County, and let me do a really common last name. I'll search for Smith, and I'm going to click search. And so here's all the people with the last name Smith who had land patents for Choctaw County, Mississippi. And let's say you're related to this George S. Smith. If you click on this, you can view the actual document, which is pretty cool. So it's always worth coming here. Just search for your family's last name and in the county where they live, if you know the county where they lived, and you might be able to find the certificate from where they bought their land. And it tells you, the coordinates and all that, if you understand how to read that stuff, all this range, township stuff, and it tells you where their land was, which is really neat. All right, so let's talk about sources for when you have someone specifically doing African American ancestry. All of the sources we've talked about so far do apply, obviously. But there's some other places you can also try to search for those. So if they lived in Mississippi, you can do the Mississippi Department of Archives and History, Freedmen's Bureau Records, and if you just do a search for MDAH, Freedmen's Bureau Records, it's the first result here. And we're going to scroll down, and it says click to continue. So unfortunately, you can't search these by the person's full name because that's not how they were listed, but you can change and search by their first name. So if they had a really common, like if their name was Sally, that's not going to be a lot of use, but if they had an unusual first name, sometimes you can find them that way. You can search by the planter they were working for. So if you're looking for their last name, they might have been working for a planter with that same last name. Not everyone had the same last name as the planter they worked for, but a lot of them did. So you could try that, or you could try searching by county. If you know the plantation they lived on, you could try that as well. So let's just say we're looking for someone with the last name Smith. And let's just see what we get for that. So Freedmen's Bureau records primarily cover 1865. You're going to get some that are a little bit later, like here's one that was 1867. But generally, these Freedmen's Bureau contracts were drawn up right after the Civil War, right after these people had been emancipated. And so usually they were working for the same people who had enslaved them, almost always. So that can be a hint of what plantation they might have worked on. So there, you can see there's some that do have last names, fortunately, that can be helpful. So this is a Lucy Amerson who's working in Hinds County. She's 43 years old, and she's working for someone named Joseph H. Smith. So this can be a possible way for African Americans to figure out what plantation their ancestors might have worked on, what county they might have lived in, or what person might have quote, quote, owned them, or what person they worked for. And that can possibly lead you to other types of records. So these Freedmen's Bureau records are really, really useful. Another really great source for African American genealogy is ourblackAncestry.com. This site is owned by Sharon Morgan, who is actually a woman who lives right here in Noxubee County, Mississippi. And she's put together this whole site that people can join. They have a Facebook community, which I highly recommend people join if they're interested in this, because it's really active. And you'll often have people saying, hey, I'm looking for people with this last name in this county, in this state. So it's a really great way to connect to people or post your own questions. So this really great Facebook community, highly recommended. And Sharon has other types of things on there that can be really useful. So I do recommend this site for both white genealogists and Black genealogists, because just sometimes Sharon's in the Facebook group, she'll share articles about genealogy workshops in general that don't only apply to African American genealogy. Sometimes she posts specifically African American genealogy. So if you're interested in any kind of genealogy, this is a great site and a great Facebook page to join. Okay, so I think that in general, when you have a patron come in asking for help, make sure they know the basic sites where they can start a family tree for free. Make sure they know about the free sources that are available to them on Heritage Quest and FamilySearch, especially if they're looking for Mississippi records. FamilySearch does have those records that other sites don't have. Make sure they know about the sites where they can search cemetery records, because in a state like Mississippi that doesn't have great online records, sometimes a headstone might be your only source for a birth date or a death date for somebody, you know, because our records are terrible. So those headstone dates can be really important. Make sure they know about newspaper sites that they can at least search for free and see if there's stuff on there they can use. And if they do find stuff they can use, they can do those free trials and just remember to cancel it. Make sure they know about Google Books, an excellent source for family histories and county histories that often contain tons of genealogical information. And just get, in general, you probably already know this if you're a librarian, just get ready for people to talk your ear off about their family history, because once people get talking about it, it's kind of hard to stop them.